The James Show Podcast.
Is shaken baby syndrome a thing? It's the James Show, News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. Well, it used to be a thing. Now some doctors are saying it's not a thing. And now there's a guy that's caught in limbo because he's going to be put to death for shaken baby syndrome. And now it's not a thing anymore. And is he still going to be put to death? One of the guys fighting it, State Rep Brian Harrison, back on the James Show. And this is interesting because now we're not going to gripe about what a terrible job the state legislature's doing. We're going to be talking about sort of a true crime situation we have here in Texas. And yeah. I'm glad you're coming on because, let me just be a little vulnerable here. I don't know all the details of this case, so I don't have a strong opinion either way. So explain this to us like we've never heard it before.
It's hard and it's complicated, but James, it's always great to be with you, my friend. And I'm super excited to not have to start the show by telling what a dumpster fire the state legislature has been this week because we're not in session. So anyway, on to better news. And where the state of Texas, a part of it, the Court of Criminal Appeals absolutely did the right thing in the Robert Roberson case today, which is to stop his execution. The state of Texas was going to kill a man named Robert Roberson 7 days from today. And this is hot off the press. I'm still literally reading the documents as I'm on the air with you. But for folks who have just not been following along, as short and simple as I can make this, about 20 years ago, a guy named Robert Roberson was convicted of capital murder of killing, allegedly, his 2-year-old daughter, whose name was Nikki. Nikki was a precious child who lived a short and very tragic and very sick life. She was acutely ill. She was chronically ill. She had to go to the doctor or the emergency room of the hospital almost 50 times in her very short life for countless various types of sicknesses and ailments, including breathing, apnea and infections. And she had all kinds of sicknesses, and including in the 2 days leading up to her tragic death, Robert, her father, and other family members had taken her to the hospital, as well as to the pediatrician multiple times, getting medical care for her because she was very, very sick, very high fevers, and she has a history of breathing problems. She had, even when she wasn't with her father, she had multiple times absolutely collapsed, turned blue, stopped breathing, and had to be medically resuscitated at the hospital. So she has a history of this. Well, after Robert, who won custody of her relatively short time before this happened, that her death, he gets custody of her. She's at his home. And because it's the only two of them there, when she stops breathing again, he rushes her to the hospital when he finds her unconscious. And they don't know what to make of it because they have a girl whose basically has had brain death. She's still alive. They put her on life support. And they don't know what happened. But Robert, who is an autistic man with only a 9th grade special education, they just immediately presumed something that was much more in vogue back then, which is, she stopped breathing and he was with her. And there's this theory called shaken baby hypothesis. And what it basically says is if you have 3 symptoms, bleeding of the brain, swelling of the brain, and retinal hemorrhaging, you could just presume it was something called shaky baby syndrome, and then you could presume it was a result of child abuse, something that is not thought today because there's a bajillion other reasons that we now know can cause those exact same triad of symptoms. So they prosecute him, they arrest him, a hastily done medical examiner, hastily done autopsy, totally sloppy all over the place, charge him, convict him, sentence him to death, and his own court-appointed a government-appointed lawyer at the trial didn't even bother to defend Robert's innocence, even though Robert said he was innocent. He tells the jury, yeah, we agree with the prosecutor. He must have shaken her to death. So no jury has ever heard the mountain of medical, scientific, and other evidence that points to actual innocence. In this case, it's been a 20-year travesty of justice. He has spent many, many years in solitary confinement. He has almost been executed multiple times before, but the judges, the brave conservative judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals, they chose to push aside the tremendous and dishonest political pressure to execute somebody. Because remember, it's hard. You don't want to be accused of being soft on crime. But here's the thing, executing an innocent or a potentially innocent person is the exact opposite of justice. And justice demands, especially for those of us like me who support the death penalty, we have got to be the most vigilant in ensuring that innocent people are never subjected to it. So now he's going to have another shot for his lawyers to argue for him to have a fair trial. And that's all that we want to have happen here. Those of us who have been fighting this case is government screws up. Government screws up just about everything. Government gets it wrong all the time. The courts have gotten it wrong in this case, and that he's never been afforded a fair trial. He needs to have a fair trial where a jury for the first time can hear all the evidence that the state may have pointing to why they think he's guilty. And for the first time ever, all of the evidence pointing to the fact that there were natural and other medical and scientific causes that caused this poor little girl to stop breathing when she happened to be home with Robert.
State Rep Brian Harrison, I understand that trials can have errors. And what about the appeals process? These factors that you talked about, they didn't come up through any of the appeals process?
Yeah, that's there's decades of the habeas and other appeals process here, and it has basically been one travesty of justice with conflicts of interest, right and left, where the judges basically refused to ever even consider the mountain of new evidence that was brought before him. And I don't know why, but I know that's the case. At every opportunity for both the court system to within itself get it right and somebody go, oh, you know what? Hey, guys, we made an error here. We need to fix it and go give this guy a new trial. They could have done that. Also, all of the other options, the Court of Criminal Appeals up until today has consistently ruled against Robert, oftentimes just by a one-vote margin, but they've gotten it wrong. The Board of Pardons and Parole has refused to look at the new evidence. Governor Abbott has refused to look at the new evidence for 20-plus years. Every opportunity to give him relief and a new trial has, for whatever reason, been absolutely ignored, and not the least of which is we have on the books a junk science law, which literally says if the main reason you were convicted was on the basis of some medical hypothesis or some scientific theory that later we realize, hey, we don't think that way anymore. The science has changed, or there's new science evidence like DNA. You get a new trial. So state law really required this guy to have been given a new trial well over a decade ago.
State Rep Brian Harrison, you're a pro death penalty guy, and you don't always match up with, like, the Innocence Project. They're always against anyone being executed at all times ever. Every case they've ever reviewed, the guy didn't deserve to be killed. So they mean nothing to me. The Marshall Project, they mean nothing to me. But there have been people that I respect their opinion in so many other facets, like you. Dr. Phil has spoken out on behalf of this guy. Yep. The novelist John Grisham, a fantastic writer, by the way. So now you've got my attention. And, I have a shortcoming. I'm not interested in forensics like the rest of America. You're like... 5 of the top 10 shows are like Law and Order or Cold Case or something. My wife loves them. I don't have that gene in my body. So I'm not as good at stories like this as other people. But what evidence was presented in his trial that made the jurors in Anderson County think that he was guilty? And so I've tried to look that up, and near as I can find is it wasn't just shaken baby syndrome. There were other injuries that were pointed at. And what's the excuse for that, or what's the comeback to that?
Yeah. So two things. I want to take the first point on that because it's so important. People are always asking, why are you so outspoken on this? Because quite frankly, I've gotten a lot of very false and dishonest attacks from people that consider themselves, small government conservative Republicans. That they're not, but they think that they are. And they view this as they tried to castigate this as some, quote, Democrat-led effort to abolish the death penalty. Well, for some people, like you said, you mentioned some organizations, that might be true for them, but not for me. I am a strong, lifelong supporter of capital punishment. But it's actually because of that I'm so outspoken on this, because I firmly believe it is most incumbent on supporters of the death penalty to make sure that innocent or potentially innocent people are never subjected to it. I'm not going to let my state or my children or the next generation inherit a state where the government, keep in mind, the government that screws things up all the time, can deprive people of their liberty and certainly not their life without due process and without a fair trial, something Robert Roberson, as a matter of fact, has never happened. As to your second question, well, he was convicted of capital murder, right? A jury must have heard something. And this is why people start getting very confused, because there's revisionist history going on here. Almost everybody defending the execution is engaged in a dishonest rewrite of history by saying, okay, shaken baby syndrome, that was maybe brought up at trial, but he was convicted of other things. Oh, we'll say he beat her to death. That's the official position. of the Attorney General's office. They say that a jury convicted him of, quote, beating his daughter so viciously that she died. Well, this is a real problem because, number one, the jury did not convict him of beating her. They convicted him on the basis of shaken baby syndrome, period, full stop. And in fact, Judge Lee Finley, in his concurrence today, detailed this. He said that he reviewed the trial transcript and he found 79 references to shaking, 130 references to shaking during the guilt or innocence phase of trial, and 15 references to shaking during trial. And then he quotes the prosecution, which told the jury he shook her to death, and the defense attorney, against Robert's own objections of innocence, claims of innocence, he told the jury, yep, this is, quote, a shaken baby case. So the jury heard the prosecution say he must have shaken her to death, and the defense attorney said he must have shaken her to death. But here's the irony of the whole thing. The only way you get to this shaken baby hypothesis, which is now largely discredited, including by the guy who founded it, he's distanced himself from all this. The only reason they had to theorize about shaking is because there was no actual physical evidence of abuse of any kind. And in fact, when the Attorney General and the other people are now saying, well, he was convicted of beating her, now they've got a real problem because we have photographs, we have CAT scans, a CAT scan, which, by the way, was never shown to the jury, and we have tons of other medical and scientific documentation that show that not only was she not beaten to death, we can prove this girl did not even have a single hairline fracture, proven by the medical records. And the prosecution's own expert child abuse pediatrician at trial testified to the jury that when she inspected her entire body, she only found, quote, minimal and insignificant bruising. So if they're going to say that he beat her to death, which is the official position of the prosecution right now, you've got a problem because the Texans would have to believe that this girl, Nikki Curtis, was the only 2-year-old in history to have ever been beaten to death without having one serious bruise anywhere on her poor body.
What about the soft spot on her head?
Yeah, so that's completely consistent as the CAT scan alludes to, which again, the CAT scan was hidden from the jury, found under the basement of the Anderson County Courthouse 15 years later. And what does it show? One single, solitary, small, non-bruised bump on the back of the head, consistent with a very short fall out of a bed. And nobody has claimed that the short fall is what killed her. That's not true at all. This girl had toxic, fatal doses of Phenergan, including with codeine, a narcotic that was administered to her and prescribed to her by 2 different doctors, unbeknownst to each other. So Robert, likely following doctors' orders, she had respiratory depressing drugs in her system that, by the way, not at the time, but now carry FDA black box warnings against given to children because it can stop their breathing. Especially, it's not supposed to be given to children who have a history of breathing apnea. Well, guess what Nikki Curtis had? Breathing apnea. She had ceased breathing, turned blue, and required medical resuscitation numerous times in her short life. And by the way, these medical resuscitations occurred when Robert was not her custodian, not in her care. So yeah, they got a real problem. They got to basically make a choice. Was she killed by shaken baby syndrome hypothesis? Well, if so, which by the way she was. That's what he was convicted of. Right. Then you got to have a new trial because of our junk science law, because it's junk science, generally speaking. Or is the state is now dishonestly claiming that she was beaten to death? But if you say that, you're really in a pickle because you got to explain how a girl can be beaten to death with not one serious bruise, not one hairline fracture, and not one serious laceration anywhere on her body. And it's not he said, she said. It's not eyewitness testimony. There are photographs and a CAT scan that the jury has never seen.
All right. Well, that was a good job breaking down the case. State Representative Brian Harrison getting out of politics, coming with guns blazing. Well, I hope there's at least a retrial. So we'll keep an eye on this. And
that's what, by the way, that's what all of us are asking. Just get in front of a jury so that for the first time in history, a jury can hear all the evidence that the state has of guilt that they think and all of the evidence of innocence, because no jury's ever heard any arguments or any evidence of this man's guilt. That's all we're asking for. And the future of the whole criminal justice system is at stake. I mean, if we get this wrong, if we execute innocent people, that's going to call into question everything about the criminal justice system in the state of Texas. And that's why I won't stand for that.
Well, good stuff. State Rep Brian Harrison, thanks for being on The James Show.
The James Show Podcast.